The night the lights went out in my life, I didn't scream. I didn't curse. I sat in the car and watched the skyline blink like an accusation. And I felt, very quietly, the world recalibrate around one simple fact. Somebody I called brother had traded me for a lifeline I never knew he wanted. That's how it begins. My name is Aaron Hale. I grew up on the west side of Detroit in a place that taught you early the arithmetic of trust. Divide your burdens, multiply your enemies, and never let your guard sleep. I learned how to fix a roof with a screwdriver and a stubbornness that smelled of tar and Sunday afternoons. I thought I knew what loyalty meant. Turns out my definition was an amateur's. I started a contracting business when I was 23 with a truck that coughed on hills and a toolbox full of hand-me-downs. 2 years in, my cousin Mason, a man with a smile built to convince banks to hand over loans, joined me. Together, we were a respectable roster of muscle and hustle. I managed crews and foundations. Mason handled clients, invoices, and investors. We called the company Northfield Supply, mostly because we liked the way the name sounded on letterhead. We worked hard, smoked cheap cigars at job completion, and grew faster than we expected. There were nights so cold I thought my bones would crack, and mornings so bright the coffee didn't taste like anything at all but victory when an opportunity came to bid on a municipal contract to retrofit a cluster of public housing units for winterization, the kind of project that, if executed properly, would secure government work and steady cash. We thought we'd made it. That contract would put us on a map. It would legitimize the muscle behind the sweat. Mason schmoozed officials the way he had a way with wallets. I did the math and made plans for crews and materials. We won. For a while, the work was everything I'd hoped. Competent crews, on-time deliveries, and a payroll that let men bring their families to Christmas. Then, like a fissure in a floor, it started to widen. The first sign was small. Invoices that arrived to my attention labeled with slight differences. Signatures I'd never seen on internal memos. Receipt tabs that had been shifted like the wrong tiles on a mosaic. Nothing so loud the company would collapse. Just the kind of crooked margins that a busy manager can mistake for sloppy bookkeeping. Mason had an explanation for everything. "We're scaling, Aaron. Little mistakes happen. I'll fix it." He always promised to fix it. One afternoon in late October, the comptroller called me with a voice that sounded like someone who had swallowed winter. "Aaron, there's a notice here about a lien," he said. "From Credence Holdings. They say you defaulted." I thought he meant our supplier, some subcontractor. I drove to the office and found a thick legal envelope slid under the door. I tore it open and read. A loan had been taken out in Northfield's name, substantial enough to throttle our cash flow. The signature at the bottom was mine. I sat. The floor felt distant. My name in ink? My name forging debt I'd never agreed to. I had the physical sensation of being watched by someone in a mirror who looked like me and yet wasn't me. I called Mason. He was quiet. He told me he'd handle it. He told me again it would be fine. He said the kind of words men say when the horizon is about to fall out from under them. He lied. He'd arranged a loan through an entity I'd never heard of and forged my sign-off to make it look official. Worse, he'd taken a side route with company funds. Wires routed through shell accounts and then into the accounts of men who didn't do business with receipts. I found this out because one of those men was impatient, and impatient men have very bad manners when you hold their money. He left a message for Mason that implied consequences. I called Mason and told him to call them back and smooth it. Mason smiled over the phone and said nothing I could trust. You learn things when you're good at math and bad at trusting. I watched Mason the next nights. Meetings in parking lots under sodium streetlights. A black sedan idling with music low and men inside with faces like folded paper. Names I'd never learned, but that carried the taste of coercion if I spoke them. I tailing him once, not close, just far enough to see that the crates he unloaded from a freight van were not insulated housings or bathtubs, but bundles tied in yellow twine and plastic. Cash. It felt like watching someone peel wallpaper from a wall and find rot you didn't know lived behind plaster. The thing that kills you in those moments is not the theft. It's the understanding that your brother has put you there. Mason hadn't just lied to pay debts. He'd used our company as a ledger for other people's sins. He had made my name collateral for a debt he owed to men who thought in outlines of fear. The contract I had once thought a bridge to respect had become a noose, and someone had tightened it around my throat with a calm I could see in his hands. I could have gone to the police. Most people would say that was the obvious choice. But where I was raised, and with the players Mason had been rubbing shoulders with, police reports aren't remedies. They're announcements. They call for responses. Threats whispered in the night, the kind that gather in the dark like angry birds. I had seen more than one man file a complaint and then not finish his coffee the next morning. So I chose silence. Silence is a dangerous thing unless you treat it as a weapon. I made it into an instrument. I learned how patient the world could be when I didn't shout, and how tenderly people's secrets unfold when you let them think they've won. I smiled at Mason in meetings while my chest burned with a plan that would take more than anger. It would take a surgeon's hand and a chess player's patience. Started where any man who wants to undo another must start, with evidence. Evidence is the thing you keep because it refuses to be dismissed. It forces people to speak where they'd rather not. Late nights became my labor again, but instead of writing bids, I copied transaction histories and FTP logs. I pulled old invoices from our cloud backups and cross-referenced routing numbers. I hacked into accounts the way we used to patch servers in the early days, not for glory, but for truth. When you search for someone's hand in a ledger, you learn to look for the tremor that betrays a forgery. I found the tremors. I found the shell companies Mason used, names that read like puzzles. Marlin Advisory, OrthoNexus, Credence Holdings. I followed the wires north and west until they landed in a set of accounts with a common beneficiary. A consultancy with an address that matched a mailbox downtown. A place where envelopes accumulate like leaves. I ordered copies of the receipts that had been used to justify the transfers. Every story had a lie in it. In this one, the lie was a series of consultancy fees that delivered cash into the pockets of men who timed their strikes carefully. The receipts were forged with neat handwriting, the dates shifted by a few days, amounts rounded off. Sloppy, if you were paying attention. But attention can be bought. Men buy attention with gifts, with promises, with small kindnesses that look like generosity. Church ladies call it charity. In Mason's world, it was access. He had access now to the kind of liquidity that made people fast friends. He had traded our future for that liquidity, and he thought himself untouchable. He had another vice, too, a human flaw you can count on when you're finishing a case. He loved to impress women the way others collect coin, showily, carelessly, and always in public. He couldn't resist a pretty face. He loved to tell stories at length and believed he could charm trouble into being forgetful. That flaw became the key in a plan that required no violence and only the elegant cruelty of public ruin. I didn't go after him with knives or guns. I didn't do anything illegal. I built a slow collapse using sunlight and the people who revered cash more than ethics. First, I leaned into the small things that feed paranoia. I sent anonymous emails to the board and to a few local journalists linking to a set of irregularities in our filings. I didn't accuse. I presented. Accusations can be ignored. Data, when curated intelligently, is a louder voice than uproar. Then I sowed distrust where he needed unity most. I reached bankers with questions that sounded like caution and did not name names. I flagged transactions as requiring review. Compliance departments are cowards by temperament and thorough by training. They freeze what they can't explain overnight and call for audits. Audits, even brief ones, can be an operation's worst enemy. Money that can disappear overnight stops moving. Contracts pause. A company that relies on timely payments starts to hemorrhage when wire transfers are held. At the same time, I began to distribute rumors through channels that only men like Mason pay attention to. Whispers at charity events, a casual mention to a landlord, an offhand question at the pub where his partners drank the same whiskey. I was careful to keep my voice out of it. The best sabotage is clean. When people suspect betrayal, they look inward. They second-guess loyalty. They sharpen knives for allies they once hugged. It worked. The first cracks weren't dramatic. They were quiet visitors. A funder delayed an infusion. A supplier demanded cash on delivery. A foreman asked for payroll in cash. Mason started to lose the ease with which he navigated the room. He began to pick his words where he used to throw them like coins. The man who once wielded charm like armor now treated it like threadbare cloth, trying to cover wounds. But I still needed the proof that would topple him publicly, documentation he couldn't buy forgiveness from. I had copies now. I had metadata, routing numbers,